time once again to slip into your camo, grab your bow, and join us out in the field for another episode of the Up North Journal, presented by PSE Archery. The Up North Journal crew is knocked and ready to rock for another exciting adventure. So let's step outside and hit the trail.
This episode of the Up North Journal podcast is brought to you by PSE Archery,
Scentlock Technologies,
Scent Blocker,
Rambo Bikes,
Hunter's Blend Coffee,
Limwalker Game Calls,
Stanislawski Releases,
Copper John Sights,
Easy Cut Outdoor Products,
Fourth Arrow Camera Arms,
Wind Sense Hunting Sense,
X-Stand Tree Stands,
Spot Shooters,
Gut Check Indicators,
and Packermax Cultipackers. And don't forget, you can catch us in syndication at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on goodtalkradio.com. Welcome back to another episode of the Up North Journal. By your host, Mike Adams, sitting in the cabin. Danny's taking care of a few little odds and ends over there. But before we get going, as always, we start the show. We want to remind you about Hunter's Blend Coffee, the official coffee here at the Up North Journal. If you use our UNJ promo code, which you see right there, use that when you check out. You'll save 10% on your order. So
yes, you will.
Make sure that you get over there and get you some at huntersblendcoffee.com.
A little coffee on a warm evening. Actually, I think yesterday was more humid than today. So.
Could have been, yeah.
But you got burnt just the same.
It doesn't matter how humid it is. When you get burnt, you get burnt. But I tell you what, why don't we just go ahead and just jump right into this. Tonight, we have none other than Chris Schnur. Chris from Beyond the Ears over in Oxford, Michigan. Chris, how you doing tonight?
Doing fantastic.
I see you're sitting there in the shop tonight. Made a trip over to the shop to join us here on the show. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, yeah. Anytime.
So the reason we got him, Danny's brother,
Terry,
actually asked a question. Was it last week or week before?
It was last week, matter of fact.
Talking about arrow selection. And who better to talk to?
Well, it just kind of fell into place because you decided to make a trip to go see Chris about arrows.
Yeah, actually I did. You know, Chris, I stopped over there. Needed some arrows for the target bow. You know, I'm shooting the PSE Shootdown this year, and I wanted to talk to you about arrows. And I know you've been tinkering and playing with arrows here for quite a while now, so I wanted to pick your brain a little bit about it. So I'm just going to let you jump in here and kind of run down how you got me set up.
Yeah, so Mike came in, brought his Shootdown in. I knew roughly the specs. We've seen Mike's bows before at times, so I knew roughly what spec he was going to be looking for. And I asked Mike I asked you what you were really looking for, what you were going to be using the arrow for. And I believe if we talked about it, you were going to be using it for some field archery events that you were going to try to shoot this summer.
Yep.
Maybe some 3D, backyard shooting, things of that nature, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So
absolutely.
We had a lot of options. I mean, I guess there's a lot of directions to go. And being that you're new to target archery and kind of getting way serious into it, there's kind of different stages you want to go through. I wanted to get you an arrow that was ultra durable, but speed wasn't really our focus. It was more so about what was going to be the most accurate platform for you.
Mm-hmm.
So we went with a smaller diameter arrow shaft, something that's going to be more forgiving for you to shoot, something that we could tune really easily out of that bow. And then we went with a smaller fletching, went with a spine specific to that bow because being that I own one of the Shootdowns, I know through some testing that I've done and through some testing that we've done with Dan as well, we know some certain spines that bow really likes, and especially with that evolved cam system, that it's actually different than any other binary I've worked with. Typically binary cams like a weaker spine. This one likes a stiffer spine. So we made selections based on that. Went with heavy front weight, probably heavier than you've ever thought you've run into the front of your arrows before, but will actually make that arrow fly a ton better and more accurately long term.
Yeah, you talked about heavier on the front end. That was one of the things that really kind of surprised me. You know, what I'm shooting now, running 85 grains, and you're stepping it up quite a bit. And, I was like, wow, we're really going to do that much, and you kind of explained some of those things to me. Because honestly, when it comes to arrows, I know what an arrow is. I know how to fletch an arrow. I know how to put a weight on the front of it. But when it comes to the science behind it, I'm really green at that. So I really appreciate you being able to help me with that. But you're talking about something that's a little more forgiving. Kind of explain what you mean by that.
So as a target archer, I mean, my primary background is in target archery. That's really where I got my start in archery. So when it comes to forgiveness in an arrow, it's like forgiveness in a bow. So historically, when you look at forgiveness, you're looking at bigger brace heights, you're looking at longer axle to axle. So you have a very forgiving platform in your shoot down, right? It's a
Yep.
tall bow. It's got a big brace height. It's not designed for speed, but it is pretty quick. But speed isn't the main goal. So we look at that the same way with the arrow. If you have a really, if you have a really, really stiff arrow, it's going to be very heavy typically, right? So at longer distances, say we're shooting a field tournament like you shot with Dan last year, you were out to 80 yards at sometimes.
Right.
So if you're taking 80-yard shots with a really, really stiff, heavy arrow, that arrow has a lot of drop, right?
Yep.
So because of how slow that arrow is traveling through the air, it has a tendency to have more arc, more, the ballistic curve on that arrow is higher.
Gotcha.
So your likelihood of missing low or on a weaker shot, dropping low, hitting high, the variance of mistake is higher. So what we like to do is like to keep the arrow for field archery. I like to keep it a little bit lighter. That way we can keep that speed right around an optimal level, but still have enough front weight in that arrow to actually pull it through the air. So
Gotcha.
back to what we were discussing, like with tip weight a little bit, we are actually putting 140 grains in the front of your arrow. Now, that sounds like a lot, but the average person is typically running about 113 to 118 grains depending on what they do, because a lot of people don't take their insert into consideration when they're screwing in the head. So got a 13 to 18 grain insert on a standard aluminum insert, screwing 100 grains in the front, 118 grains, add glue, maybe 120, 122 grains. But by adding that, we're actually really allowing that arrow to pull through wind better and actually penetrate a little bit better as well. So you're more likely to get less drop over longer distances. That's the best way of looking at it. So when it comes to forgiveness, and we do this a lot with our indoor setups as well, with our bigger indoor shafts, I want that arrow to cover up every mistake that I make and actually hit the center when I don't think it should. So there's a lot of different things you can take into account while building that arrow that actually make it more accurate for you.
Okay.
So we can go into all that, but there's things like selections you're going to make with fletchings, what direction you're going to do your fletchings, whether it's right helical, left helical, how much front tip weight you're going to do, what spine arrow, total arrow weight. All that plays a factor into the overall accuracy of that arrow, both indoors, and then when you go to outdoors, it can be completely opposite on your setup.
Okay, so you get a guy comes into your shop, and he wants arrows, and whether it's hunting or field archery, whatever. Where do you start? I mean, when you start breaking it down and maybe doing these custom builds, where do you start with somebody?
So the biggest argument we have in archery is what's more important, speed or kinetic energy, right? That's mainly why I kind of brought that question up, is what's the most important thing to you, speed or kinetic energy? And the reason I ask that is because I could spend hours discussing with people philosophies on what's more important, speed, kinetic energy, or the third one, which is momentum, right? So I can have hour-long discussions, and nobody ever seems to agree on that. And then, of course, you add FOC in there. You're adding all these different things in there. So it can be summed up in what's the most important thing to you, speed or kinetic energy. If a guy comes in and he says, listen, speed's the most important thing to me, all right, so I know that the overall arrow build that I need to build for that guy or recommend is going to have to be a relatively lightweight arrow so that I can get as much speed out of that bow as possible. Because if he comes in with a 350 feet per second bow, like an Expedite at 360, he expects 360 feet per second, or at least he knows what numbers to expect based on that bow. Like, he's going to be your geek that's going to come in and say, I want to be at 246 feet per second because that's what I've calculated, right?
Right.
So I need to give you as close to that or be able to explain to him why we're not quite there, but we're close, and justify that to him. So with that being said, I need to do my part as the aero tech to make the recommendation that will get him to where he wants to be, but still build him the most accurate and forgiving arrow as possible, right? So, and then on the flip side with kinetic energy, those are kind of the easier guys. I can build a really super heavy arrow at 500, 600, 700 grains that'll actually absolutely hammer. But again, I want to make sure that a broadhead's going to fly right, that it's going to tune out of the bow, that he's going to be able to shoot that out to 60, 70 yards if that's what he's using it for. And then also it's not going to, it's not going to negatively impact his long-range accuracy or short-range accuracy. I want to make sure he's not giving anything up by building that super heavy arrow unless we absolutely have to. Does that make sense?
Yep, I got
So,
you.
if I've got a guy going to Africa and he's hunting Cape buffalo or he's hunting some really thick-skinned animal that he's really going to have a ton of punch and a ton of energy behind, I don't care if speed or kinetic energy is important to him. We're going to build a momentum arrow and it's going to be 900 to 1,000 grains. And at that point, I'm throwing every heavyweight component I possibly can at that arrow to get him there so that when he goes out west or goes to Africa or something like that, he's successful.
Yeah, you want to blast through. You don't want any marginal shots. I get what you're saying.
Absolutely. So one of the big things that I really run into, and we run into a lot in the industry or just in shops and everything, and I challenge everyone to kind of think about this when you're thinking about your arrows. When every year everybody sees the new bows come out, right? See the brand new PSEs, you're seeing all the brand new primes, all the new bows are coming out, and you're excited about them, right?
Yep.
Everyone's always talking about the brand new bow they're going to go out and buy, or they want to go shoot the new bow, or they want to do that.
Well, speaking of that, Chris,
Yep.
I just got word as we're live on the show that in 2 days, PSE is going to be coming out with something new.
Oh, they are.
Yes.
Target bow, hunting bow, do we know yet?
I'm assuming a target bow because I just got word from Dan the man himself.
Oh, well, don't tease me with a good time. You know I'm going to be excited to be looking forward to that.
All right, where were we? We were killing Cape Buffalo. Last thing I heard.
So back to coming in and looking at the new bows. Everyone's always excited about the new bows. They seem to pull the limelight out of everything. And what happens is you're spending a lot of money on a new bow, and you're going hunting, right? The bow is the very small percentage of what actually, I guess, that's the weapon you use, but it's not the weapon that actually does the killing or the hunting aspect of it, right?
Right.
When you shoot something at an animal, it's the arrow. You're not throwing your bow at it unless, well, we've all seen that video of the guy running and he chucks his bow at the turkey. But I mean, if you're actually launching the arrow at whatever you're shooting it at, and if you're launching an inferior arrow or an inferior product at something, or an arrow that's not quite right for your setup, you're not getting the optimum performance out of that setting. And that's kind of something I want to kind of change the thought process. We've actually been successful here at Beyond the Years, really changing that thought process, because it's a conversation that starts from the very beginning of the encounter with the customer. Is what are you using? What's your end game here? Where do we want to be? What are you hunting? Where are you going? It's more of a total experience kind of deal, and that's why we try to package everything together for everybody.
Well, I got to imagine it's a lot like, a guy goes out and he gets a new gun because he's going to go to Africa or he's going to go whitetail hunting.
Oh, yeah.
And they walk down the aisle and they see all the different bullets that they can buy for this thing, but they don't really take in mind the cartridge that they really need to take out, and they don't spend a lot of time asking those important questions. So I got to imagine it's the same thing with the arrow, and actually never really thought about it that way, putting more thought process into that projectile that you're going to use versus the actual thing that's going to push it.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, we've all had that broadhead that just doesn't fly, right?
Yeah.
You bought that broadhead, you screwed it into the front of your arrow, you went outside, you shot it at the target, it hit 2.5 feet left at 20 yards, and you can't figure out why, and you're like, oh, these broadheads are junk, right?
Right.
I'll never shoot these broadheads again. You unscrew them, you go get something else, you put those in, they hit 6 inches away, and you're like, perfect. I can just move my sight 6 inches, right?
Right.
I mean, I'll be honest. I've been that guy. I've been that guy that doesn't want to, hunt. I don't have a lot of time during hunting season because I'm an archery tech. So if I get to screw a broadhead in the front of an arrow and launch it at a deer or a turkey or whatever, I'm ecstatic. I'm at the shop all the time for that stuff. So if I can get out and hunt, great. If I have that time, awesome. But when it comes to tuning, it's not necessarily the broadhead's fault. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I know what you're saying. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's get into the tuning aspect, but we'll take a quick break here real quick. We come back. Let's jump into the tuning, and let's let you start showing us how to tune these arrows.
Absolutely.
All right, we're going to step outside. We'll be right back after this.
PSE Archery has reinvented the way you buy bows.
From now on, you can make the most educated decision possible
by basing your bow choice specifically on your shooting needs and goals.
All you need to do is ask yourself, what kind of shooter am I? What do I want to achieve?
PSE will help find the right category for you.
So, what kind of shooter are you?
Find out at psearchery.com.
Welcome back. Second segment of the show. We're still on live here talking with Chris Schnur from Beyond the Years Archery over in Oxford, Michigan. We're talking tuning arrows.
Yeah, we
tonight.
are. And just so we know, Chris, as we go along here, one of the questions is, are you going to talk about the topic of on fletching, whether helical versus offset as we go along.
Yeah, that's definitely something we're going to cover once we get to that part, for sure.
Okay, well, before we went to break, we're talking about tuning now. So we're going to let you tune the arrow for us. Take us down that road.
Absolutely. So once we've determined what kind of arrow shaft you want to use, and let's cover a little bit on what kind of arrow shafts and what kind of technology is out there and existing. Because, I mean, back in the day, we've got a lot of different things. I mean, we've gone from a day where everybody out in the world was using this arrow right here or some variation of it, which was that Easton Super Light or Gamegetter or Game Setter XX75 aluminum arrow, right? Everybody remembers that arrow, right?
I had a ton of them.
Everybody, if you haven't shot one of these arrows,
you're not an archer.
Yeah, go out and find some at a garage sale or something and play with them and hang them on your wall. They're an awesome piece to have. We always have a couple around the shop. Just people ask questions about them, and we like to compare them to what's kind of out there or what's new. But that's your standard aluminum arrow. Now, why was aluminum so popular? It was popular because it was pretty strong, right? Aluminum's pretty durable. It does hold a bend, which was the downside to it, but it's extremely straight. Aluminum, they can get aluminums to 0.001 straightness. Half the time you put a brand new set of aluminum arrows on what's called a ram spine tester or a straightness checker, and they're perfect right out of the box, which is kind of amazing that you can get a 32-inch stick to be perfectly straight from end to end, right?
Yep.
So that was the popularity of them, was when you had bows that didn't have perfect center shot or didn't have the optimum setup for an arrow, you were running a basically perfect arrow shaft. And you maybe got 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 shots, depending on what you were shooting them into or how well they were taken care of before they were crooked, bent, or not straight. So we had years and years of aluminum arrows. And then they came out with graphite or carbon arrows. And then carbon arrows became very popular because they were lighter, they were faster, they didn't bend, but they did break. That was the downside, right? And a lot of people were nervous about that because, I mean, carbon breaking, we've all seen the horrible pictures online of people with carbon splinters and arrows explode into the back of their hands, and it's not pretty, right? And that's why everyone kind of advocates for that, and why every single arrow almost on the market has that warning, like flex first, right?
Right.
If you hit an arrow in the target, it takes 2 seconds to take it and just give it a little flex real quick and make sure you don't hear any popping sounds or snapping sounds. And it saves the back of your hand. I mean, and your bow potentially blow up too if that happens.
Well, we got a picture here of the ones you sent us there, and I mean, you want one of them things going through the back of your hand? Not me.
Splintered like that? That'd feel really good.
No way.
Absolutely, that was an arrow that we found on the course at Total Archery Challenge this year. You were up at Total Archery Challenge. Yep. You saw the absolute massacre that occurred to arrows this year. It was
the graveyard, yes.
I don't think I've ever seen that many broken arrows in my entire life, but I never heard anybody complain about it, which is really a good thing. But yeah, and that one's a little bit about, it goes into some arrow construction and why arrow construction has gone the direction it has and why it becomes so important for the type of hunting and type of shooting that you're doing. As well as the different types of weave of carbon and why some carbons are more durable than others and why certain construction's better than others, right? So we went from the aluminum, now we're kind of stepping into the carbon. The big popularity we're seeing in the world right now is the aluminum composite arrows with like an ACC arrow or a full metal jacket. Everyone's familiar with the full metal jacket as well. The advantage of full metal jacket, it's a really heavy arrow. Carbon core, so it's lighter weight. The spine is extremely consistent, and then it has an aluminum sleeve over the top of it to give it that extra straightness tolerance, right? So it's 001 straightness. So super easy to get. You can get them in all different diameters. Easton's done a fantastic job with that lineup of arrows and actually built a great product with that heavy weight. They even have a new dangerous game, which I think comes in at like 14 grains per inch. So super heavy arrow shaft and works exactly the way they describe it as doing. The downside to that arrow is it does have an aluminum sleeve, right? So what happens when you have an aluminum sleeve? You flex it, and
it's done.
It bends. It holds a bend. A solid aluminum sleeve has more memory or more strength of memory than the carbon does on the inside, so it's going to wobble, and it's never going to go back. One of the other arrows that we wanted an answer to that here, so we did a lot of research, and I'm you guys know me. I'm a geek for new products, so I want to look into stuff and see what else is out there and test stuff. And we actually went to ATA show this year and was introduced to the new extortion arrow, which is kind of one of the coolest arrows I think I've ever seen when it comes to a hunting shaft. This one is actually it's a carbon shaft, but inside of the carbon is a stainless steel mesh. So
stainless steel?
Yep, stainless steel mesh. So it's actually woven into the carbon. So the first time I ever cut this arrow, you look on the inside, you can actually see the little metal ends on it.
Really?
So it's actually a really cool arrow. They've got it down to 3,000 tolerance right now. This is a brand new arrow for them, for over at Victory Archery. Super cool arrow, but it comes in at a super heavy weight. So we're talking like a 350 spine is like 12.9 grains per inch. You can get it like 13.1 with a 300 spine. So, I mean, you're getting a very heavy weight arrow with a ton of durability. And if you flex this arrow like you would with any other arrow, yeah, it'll wobble for a minute, but let it sit for 30 seconds. It's back to straight.
Really?
The stainless steel doesn't have the memory that the aluminum.
Oh, we've lost Chris for a second here.
Oh, where'd Chris go?
We're gonna have to redial here real quick. So let me. That's what happens with live TV. So hang on 1 second here. We'll get him back on, folks. Don't sweat here. Danny's feverishly making the connection. I tell you what, they must not have fed the squirrels turning the power generator over there, keeping the thing running. All right, so while they're making that connection, I tell you what.
No problem.
We're going to go ahead. We'll take our next break, and when we come back, we will continue the discussion here
Just tell me when you're ready.
On arrow tuning. So we'll be right back after this.
PSE Archery has always dominated the speed category. Now, the most revolutionary cam system ever to hit the market has perfected the shooting experience. Introducing PSE's Evolve Cam System, featuring extremely high let-off capabilities and the smoothest draw cycle in history. No other cam system has ever delivered this level of total comfort and total control. Experience PSE. Experience performance.
Third segment of the show, and we have Chris back online. The power's back up and running.
Hey, Chris, the picture you sent of the smashed arrows.
Yeah.
Dan wanted to know what kind of arrows those were.
So that is a Day 6 arrow.
Day 6?
Day 6, okay.
Day 6. Day 6 is a newer brand. They're a consumer direct arrow model. So it's been hard for me to actually get my hands on them to test. And so I don't know a whole lot about them, but they are a consumer direct arrow that's out there.
Okay, all right. He was asking,
and a comment from the audience from Jason Pfister says Ashley killed the breaker. She's ready to go home.
Yeah, she says it's time for Chris to go home.
Yeah, she got off work today, so she's hanging out with me right now.
All right, so kind of back to where we were. You were talking a little bit about
different technologies in the shaft.
Yep. So I'll let you pick it back up there where we're at with that.
Yeah, so we have the extortions with the stainless steel core, which is completely new, something we've really never seen before, and they're kind of getting into that for sure. And I've actually been very impressed. Craig, the owner here, actually has a set of these set up, and I believe these are what he's going to be taking elk hunting potentially this year. He's actually got 2 arrows that are in the running for that. That's one of them for sure. He's actually shooting that out of his Evolve, I believe. Okay. Yeah, that's going out of the Evolve 30 or Evoke 31. Sorry, Evoke 31.
Okay.
So he's got that set up very heavy with more tip weight, and we'll discuss the components a little bit more later. So that's now all the shafts that I've covered right now are parallel shafts. And now what's a parallel shaft? That means that from the front to the back, the arrow is completely straight and level, right? There's no diameter change, nothing. One of the arrows that we brought in this year is called it's a tapered shaft. Okay. So this arrow is actually a standard 1/66 diameter, so would be considered like a micro diameter. So anyone that's familiar with like a VAP or VAP arrow or a 1/66 micro diameter arrow. I'm trying to think what other companies have a 1/66. I believe Easton has one. I just can't think of the name of it off the top of my head. But like the gold tip Pierce Tours or Pierces, they're all a 1/66 standard diameter arrow. The unique thing about this arrow is it actually tapers down in the back to a smaller diameter.
Okay.
So the tail section of the arrow is actually weaker than the front section. There's a lot of tuning advantages you can gain from that. A lot of arguments as to whether that's the right way to go or not. In target archery, it becomes kind of a cool tool that we can use to really fine-tune an arrow. When you go to build an arrow, if you cut an arrow down, the stiffer it gets, right? Mm-hmm. because it's smaller, right? You're going from flexing it out here to flexing it in here. It's going to be harder. The unique thing about that arrow is when you cut from the front, you actually make it weaker. When you cut from the back, you actually make it stiffer.
Okay.
And the reason being is you're cutting from a thinner walled carbon to a thicker walled carbon. So you could actually have a 355 spine arrow, cut it evenly from both ends, and you still have a 355 spine arrow. So now that I just kind of mentioned the whole spine thing, spine is one of those things that's really misunderstood. I have a lot of people that'll call and ask, hey, when I ask them, like, well, what's the weight of your arrow you're shooting right now? And they go, well, I have a 400 weight arrow. Well, or I have a 350 weight arrow or 300 weight arrow. Okay, well, you don't have a 300 weight arrow, you have a 300 spine arrow. Now, what is spine? Spine is the actual measurement of the flex of the shaft when you have 2 pounds based at 28 inches. So I know that sounds a little confusing, but when you take, this is like a ram spine tester. This is one of the things that we use here at the shop. And let me tilt my camera down a little bit.
Okay.
It's one of the things we use at the shop. So I'll actually take one of these arrows, and I have a bare shaft here. When you put it at 28 inches, you actually have a weight that you can put on it. And I don't know if you guys can see that scale right there.
Yep.
Try to cover it a little bit. When you actually place this 2-pound weight on it, you can see that it actually flexes that arrow, right?
Right.
And this scale actually gives me a reading as to what that deflection or spine reading actually is. And you can tell that as I rotate that arrow, you can actually get some deviation to the spine, right?
Yeah, I can see the needle bouncing just a little bit.
You can see it moving. So certain spots in the spine or certain spots around the arrow are stiffer than other parts of the spine. And reason being is most carbon is rolled, right? So when it's rolled, there's actually a seam on that.
Gotcha.
Now, a lot of companies do a really great job of cleaning that seam up and doing certain things to make it so that as it weaves across, you're actually reducing the amount of variance that you get on that, but it still exists. So like companies like Victory and a couple other companies out there, they're actually indicating on the arrow where the high spot on the spine is or low spot on the spine. So they're spine aligning every shaft for you right out of the box, which makes my job a little bit easier. All I have to do is verify it. So that's kind of spine and arrows, all kind of shafts all in a nutshell, I guess.
So you talked about spine. What about when you move to the rear of the arrow, when you talk about fletching, like one of our questions from Colin Worthy, helical versus offset?
Yep. So really helical and offset and vanes, that all determines a lot of what type of broadhead you're using and how far you want to shoot. So I'm grabbing a couple arrows here while I can, with a couple different vane options on them to discuss. So mechanical broadheads, right? Everyone kind of says mechanical broadheads, field point accuracy, right? You hear that a lot, or you read that a lot.
That's what they say.
Field point accuracy. Well, I'm going to call BS on everybody that says that a field tip and a broadhead will hit the same spot, right? Because it doesn't happen. I'm yet to find one at 100 yards that will literally put a field tip and a broadhead in the same hole. Reason being is you have drag on the front, right? You have an airfoil.
Right.
It's different for both arrows. So unless you have like G5 Outdoors actually came out with a really cool tool for theirs where they came out with, it's called a BMP or a ballistic match point. So they actually designed a field tip that you can screw into the front of your arrow that will ballistically fly identical to their broadhead, right? So it makes it a little easier to tune it and you don't have to waste a broadhead for it. So that's kind of cool. But mechanical broadheads have less airfoil. That's the theory behind them. And reason being is because they're smaller in the front, right? They're closed. Right. When they open, you get the big huge cutting surfaces, and then everything's great and wonderful. Now, what advantages does that give you? It gives you, like I said, reduced airfoil. You can run less vane on the back. So vanes or fletchings on the back. You can run less of them. Here, we do a lot of work with fixed blade broadheads. And reason being is a lot of our customer base is going out west on hunting trips. They're going hunting for elk. They're hunting for moose, bear, big game. So when it comes to hunting certain types of animals or in certain states, the laws require you to use a fixed blade broadhead. So with a fixed blade broadhead, it becomes all about stability in the arrow shaft. So when it comes to fletchings, it all comes down to how long's your arrow, what type of head are you shooting, and how many pounds and all that, all the pounds, draw length, and total arrow length all come into question. The longer your arrow, so if I have a really, really long arrow, the airfoil coming off of the front actually has time to dissipate before it gets to the back of the arrow for these fletchings to actually start doing their job in stabilizing the shaft, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I've got a really long arrow with a really small vein like this one here, if I've got a big head in the front and it blows up really big, the airfoil is really big, and it's not getting closed down until after this vein, that's where we get the 2.5 foot left or 2.5 foot right, and it never fixes itself, right?
Okay, gotcha.
Because that arrow, when it comes out of your bow, is not coming straight out of the bow, right?
Right.
We all know that because of that spine, that arrow's flexing out of the bow.
Right.
Which is called Archer's paradox. So that's the flex of the arrow as it comes out. And because of that, you need the rear of the arrow actually to stabilize what's going on in the front of the arrow. So we're seeing a huge trend, and I'm actually glad to see it, of going back to that 3 to 4 inch vein that we've seen before.
Really?
We're seeing more of a trend back to that. So for years, everybody shot this vein right here. This was super popular, the blazer vein, right? Now, a little bit of history behind the blazer vein. The blazer vein was designed for whisker biscuits.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows a whisker biscuit rest, right? So problem you're running into is plastic veins in 3 to 4 inch. You'd shoot them through a whisker biscuit. After you shot them 10 or 15 times, they would actually start to develop this like curve or wave in them, right?
Yeah.
We've all seen the aluminum arrows. These ones don't have it, but you've all seen them with the big old wrinkle in them or wobble to the vein, or they're ripping off, right? I mean, everyone's seen dad's or grandpa's arrows like that in the case. Well, they developed the blazer vein to be ultra stiff and ultra durable so that when it entered a whisker biscuit, it wouldn't distort and it would hold its shape over long periods of time. So because they had to make it so short, they had to make it a higher profile. They had to come up with this parabolic shape. So what this does is it stabilizes the arrow very well, but it's not awesome at stabilizing a fixed blade broadhead. So now that people are going back to that fixed blade broadhead, now the technology is really catching up in the fixed blade market, you're seeing a lot of guys going back to the 3 inch vein, like we're seeing here, like on these AE hybrids. You're seeing a longer 2.6 to 4 inch vein. Actually, they just developed a 2.3 inch vein, which is actually very cool for mechanical guys. We're seeing a trend going back to these for the fact that this stabilizes your arrow better. So when it comes to helical and offset really just boils down to what direction the arrow naturally wants to rotate coming off the string. Now, there's been a lot of communication about that lately, too, and we're seeing a lot of people talking about it. But the trend is, or the test people have had is, and you'll see, I don't know if you guys can see this see that little silver mark I've got on the top of this arrow?
Yep.
Well, this is one of the arrows we used to indicate on that test. So before I put fletchings or anything on this arrow, I had Craig put it in his bow. We walked up to the target, and we had him shoot an arrow at the target.
Okay.
And then we looked at what direction that silver mark went. This is the thing that people are doing now. They're looking at which direction
it's turning.
That went. So you're looking for what direction the arrow naturally wants to go.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the thing, is what direction does your arrow want to go? The problem is it's not the arrow that's dictating that. It's actually the direction of the twist in your string and the direction of your center serving and how it's wrapped around the string. So Rogue Bowstrings actually put out this really cool video where they actually described that, where he actually had a right twist string and the arrow spun one way, and a left twist string and the arrow spun the other way. Now, the downside to that is all broadheads do not have bidirectional threads, right?
Right.
You screw in a broadhead, you can only screw it in one way. You can't screw it in the other way.
Right.
So the downside is if you fletch an arrow with left helical and it's loose, you're going to be unthreading that broadhead either into your target, into the sand pit, or into the animal that you're shooting it into. So almost all hunting shafts that we build will have some sort of right helical or right offset. Helical and offset, the two differences between the two, helical actually flexes and bends the veins, so it actually twists and wraps around the arrow. Whereas offset just places the actual straight fletch at an angle. Gotcha. I don't do a lot with offset unless I'm dealing with feathers. A lot of recurve archers or traditional archers will still want feather veins. But and I know AE just launched a traditional vein, which we're going to be doing some testing on. And I'm familiar with the material that they use because of my son shoots recurve as well. So it's the same material that he's been using on a short vein. But on a 3 or 4 inch, it'll actually be some cool stuff to play with for sure.
And that leads right into another question that's being asked from Mark Burke. What do you feel is better fletching, veins or feathers?
it depends on what you're doing, but personally, I'm going to say vanes are always going to be your more versatile material of choice for a compound archer. For a recurve archer, I'm not going to say that the new vanes are the best because I haven't tested them well enough, so I don't know yet. I know that guys have had a ton of success with them, and they've been very popular, but I don't know yet. But as far as a compound archer goes, when it comes to a hunting situation, I'm always going to choose a vane mainly for its durability, the sturdiness of it, and the actual ability of that fletching or the vane to actually steer that broadhead right off the get-go and stabilize that arrow shaft.
There you go.
So I guess that's my answer for that. And that's another speed kinetic energy argument. Some guys are hardcore feather guys, and you can't tell them any different. Some guys are hardcore vane guys, and you can't tell them any different. It's really one of those preference things. Like if you put a 4-inch feather on an arrow or a 5.5-inch feather on an arrow, and you put a little like 1.7-inch ultra low profile vane like this, and you want to compare those two, okay, yeah, the feather's better. It's going to do a better job. But depending on the situation, if it's downpouring rain and you didn't treat your feathers properly, now you're better off just scraping them right off your arrow and shooting the bare shaft with the fletching or with the broadhead and hoping for the best.
There you go.
Yeah, I like it.
That's my way of looking at it, I guess. I'd rather have a plastic vane that if it's soaking wet when I shoot it, all the water is going to fly off than have a feather that's going to wrinkle and fold and look horrible and not do its job.
Right, exactly.
So one of the big trends that we've been getting into, so we talked a little bit about the back of the arrow, but the back of the arrow really kind of is dictated by what's in the front of the arrow. So we talked a little bit about the broadheads, but back to like even the inserts. So again, we talked about how bows get to really like pull everyone's attention, and then when you look at the bow, then you look at the arrows, right? So now you got the arrows, and then the arrow shaft itself really draws your attention. You're like, okay, well, I love the way it looks. I love the technology behind the arrow shaft. But then the next thing that's really, really overlooked is the actual components that go into the front of the arrow shaft and also into the back of the arrow shaft.
Inserts, outserts, and nocks.
Inserts, outserts, half-serts, nocks, threaded on half-serts. There's so many different variations out there now. And actually, if you could show one of those pictures, I actually have a picture of the bent of the arrow that actually has the bent insert in it. I'm going to pull one of those, the new ones out here to show you.
So literally, you're like in the shop being the tinker toys of putting an arrow together.
Oh, yeah. Pretty much every day.
He's like a guy with Legos.
Right, exactly.
So we got the picture up. We've got this arrow here. It's curved.
Right, yeah. That tip is completely bent over. That in typical people's world, that one is getting thrown away. The arrow's done. It's shot, right? You're never going to shoot that arrow again.
Right.
But if you look really closely and this is one of our testing arrows. This is actually, Craig took that up to Total Archery Challenge. I believe that was shot at 88 yards at the Buffalo on the Prime course.
Okay.
And he hit a solid piece of reed rod in the target that was actually part of the stand.
Okay.
He hit that reed rod and bent that arrow tip completely over. Now, that is a stainless steel insert with a stainless steel half-cert on the outside.
Okay.
So that's a very, very heavy component. I believe it's about 78 grains to begin with that we're putting just in there before we even screw a tip in. And he had 125 grains screwed into that as well. So we're talking almost 200 grains right in the front of that arrow before we even add it to the arrow shaft itself.
Mm-hmm.
So when we took this arrow, we got it. We kind of took some videos of it. I sent it over to Victory. One of my friends over at Victory kind of sent me one of those those emojis with like, oh my gosh, what the heck are you guys doing? And so I get the launch of questions of what were you shooting into? What component is that? What arrow is that? Victory's kind of we've had a fun relationship with them. We do some goofy things here that aren't contemporary for them. Actually, when we sat in their booth this year, they launched that tapered shaft that I was just telling you about. And we ordered, I believe, like 4 dozen of them. And we started ordering components, and they wanted us to order target tips for them because this arrow is actually designed specifically for target archery. But we actually ordered all these components for the Victory VAP, and we've been putting these in them and turning these into some of the best hunting arrows we've ever seen.
Really?
So you're actually getting and then the funny thing, Craig actually makes the comment that Craig's the owner here at Beyond the Ears.
Mm-hmm.
Craig made the comment, he's like, if it's good enough for the target world, it's good enough for me in the hunting world. So, which is totally true. And a lot of testing and a lot of technology comes from the target world and either trickles down into the hunting world or back and forth.
Okay.
We saw it with the Evolve Cam kind of trickling into my world and target.
Right.
And then we're seeing some of the arrows kind of trickle down into the actual hunting world.
Okay.
So with that being said, we're able to put match pieces together to build a perfect package. Now, Craig is a speed freak. He really does like a fast arrow. So with that being said, when we were building his Prime CT3 this year for a Western trip to build another contender for what he's going to take elk hunting, he wanted to really get that bow as fast as he could. We were getting great speed out of the Evoke 31 with the heavy arrow, so we wanted to make the CT3 as fast as possible. So with that being said, I had to build a lightweight arrow, but by putting a ton of energy in the front, or a ton of weight in the front, I can maintain that kinetic energy to really punch through whatever he hits and drag through the animal or drag through the target. So that's why we have a 78 grain insert. That's actually a really nifty device, the way it works. So a little bit about Victory. Victory is actually owned by Mitsubishi, so everyone's familiar with Mitsubishi. So you're getting kind of this weird mixture of worlds. You're getting an automotive, an electronics world mixed with a carbon arrow manufacturer, right?
Right.
So what we end up seeing are these weird little devices getting put into the archery world that you've never seen before. So one of the things that we noticed is when he hit that reed rod, we actually took that arrow completely apart. I was able to get the insert out, and we put it on the ram spine tester, because typically when an arrow hits a target that hard, it destroys the arrow. It's not going to be straight anymore. It's going to mess it up. And we were actually super impressed to find that that arrow was completely straight and undamaged. So we actually took the component and looked into it a little more, and we saw that these components are actually designed specifically to do what it did. It was designed to take 100% of the damage while leaving the arrow shaft completely unharmed. Now, why does that matter, right? I mean, typically you bust a component, you throw the arrow away, right? We've all done that before.
Right.
Well, this is $300 a dozen for these arrow shafts. Wow. So if you can save a shaft,
right,
and just replace, I mean, it's $50 for the inserts.
Right.
If you can just buy another pack of inserts and throw a new insert in and save the arrow, and now it's completely good to go, I would appreciate that. I mean, as from a customer standpoint, I mean, I know I would appreciate that for sure.
Well, you said Mitsubishi's involved in this. It kind of reminds me of, like, Danny, you're in the car industry. You know, you're protecting the occupant of the car. It's kind of like the crash test.
That's exactly what it is.
They use the dissipation of the energy. It's like in an impact.
It's like a bumper on a car.
Everything goes around the driver. It doesn't go to the driver. It goes around the driver.
Interesting.
Yeah, and if you look at the shape of the inserts, there's actually key things in there. They're not just ornate. They really look ornate, but they're not designed that way. They're designed to take 100% of the energy into that insert and actually protect that carbon shaft.
Wow.
So some of the arrows we've seen have a half cert where it glues, something actually glues into the arrow, and then a little piece sticks out so you can run a standard diameter broadhead, right? So the downside to that is you have the carbon with a metal post sitting right against it. What happens is when that bends, it'll crack the carbon, right?
Right.
But if I have it butted up against it with a sleeve that goes over, I can actually protect the carbon shaft, and I can move that whole piece around and not cause damage to the carbon itself, right?
Interesting.
So that's why some of the half certs that we're seeing and the technology that we're seeing them utilize with theirs, as well as a company called Ethics Archery, they're actually doing an awesome job with some of their ultra high tolerance components that they're developing as well. And I know Victory's done some stuff with them too. That we're just seeing some awesome new things coming out of the component world that we've never really thought about or never seen before.
That's interesting. Very interesting.
Amazing with technology and where we're going so fast compared to just a few minutes ago when we talked about the XX75.
Right.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and then you're going into the 3-fletch and the 4-fletch configurations. I mean, a lot of guys want to do 4-fletched. I mean, John Dudley's been playing with 6-fletched. My theory is AE needed to sell a couple vanes, and he's like, well, watch this. And now everybody wants to 6-fletch their arrows. But, I mean, it's one of those, you can put anything on the back of the arrow and stabilize it, but it's how effective and how well is it going to do that job. And can you tune that arrow and that bow and that broadhead specifically to your setup so that it hits the center every single time?
It just amazes me. I mean, just a little bit of talk we had just now about basically the impact saving the shaft. I mean, you think back thousands of years ago when people were making them out of sticks, whittling them down and putting a stone point on them. And I mean, and what we've come to today, it's just incredible. And where is it going from here? You know.
Well, the funny thing is, if you think about it from that way, I mean, yeah, years ago, people were sitting there, they were straightening out their arrow, they were putting it over wood, they were putting over fire. There was a lot more that went into arrow building. We're talking in prehistoric times or in, I guess, original traditional times, and even traditional shooters. I mean, if you ever want to sit down and actually look into arrow building, sit down with a true traditional archer who's still using cedar shafts and actually look at what they're going through. I mean, they've got more time on a ram spine tester than I think I've had in my entire life for a dozen arrows, and they're over there bending them and straightening them and fletching them and weight sorting and weight matching, component matching. They're doing tons of stuff to make a traditional bow as accurate as it possibly can be.
That's incredible. Just incredible, you know, and we're worried about just the proverbial, you and I talked about this before you even started the show, the proverbial, you know, getting it into the pie plate. Hey, I'm good to go. I can go out and I can go whitetail hunting. You know, that's the way my dad taught me, you know, when I first picked up a bow. It's like, get it in the pie plate. 20 yards, you're good to go, son.
And that was a thing, and I don't know who to credit the quote to, and I hope somebody that's watching or listening knows who to quote this to, and they can let me know. But the saying about the pie plate was actually corrected to me a couple months ago. And the saying actually goes that as long as you can hold a pie plate group at that distance, that's your max distance you can shoot. So if you're shooting at 60, 70 yards and you can hold a pie plate group, that means that's your maximum effective distance, right?
Okay.
Well, here in the Midwest, we've kind of dumbed that down to, well, if you can hold a group at 20 yards, you can kill a deer, right? Well, that's because in Michigan, if it isn't 20 yards away, you're not going to get through the sticks and trees and bushes and everything to get to the deer anyway.
Right.
So we've kind of dumped that down to pie plate at 20 yards. But
So effective range is holding it within that pie plate, whatever that distance is.
Right. I mean, now, am I going to shoot a deer at 100 yards because I know I can hold the pie plate group at 100 yards? Maybe not. But if I've got an elk at 100 yards and I've got the setup right and I've practiced and I feel like I'm effective at that, yeah, the possibility is probably a little bit higher.
Right.
Nice.
I mean, different animals, different situations, different setups.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely. Well, I tell you, obviously you've opened up a whole new avenue for me as far as my mind thinking about the science. I knew there was a lot of science behind this. And to me, I like to shoot. I like to get a good arrow, get a good bow, get a good setup, and go out and be effective. Yeah. But man, you've just opened up a whole new can of worms for me as far as thinking. And
the good thing is don't. And then the hard thing is don't. It's one of those things, and I've fallen into the trap of overthinking stuff. Mainly because I have entirely too much time on my hands to sit here in a shop and read and learn and do all this stuff and think, oh, well, I've never thought of that before. So now I got to look at my whole setup and do this. And I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've had my target bow ripped apart because I saw a post on Facebook or I read an article on this or that. And I'm like, oh, crap, now I got to move this or do that. Or I have a phone conversation with Dan where he's like, well, yeah, don't you do this to your bow? And I'm like, oh, boy, no, I don't. I got to go do that now.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, I've been very fortunate in this world, and I'll give everyone like the best recommendation I can when it comes to bow hunting, target archery, whatever. If you want to be a better bow hunter, the best thing you can possibly do is join a target league.
Absolutely.
You experienced that a little bit last year, and it's not really because I want everybody in the world to shoot a target bow or spend a bunch of money on arrows or spend a bunch of money on equipment. Reason being is you're going to surround yourself by a level of archer that looks at things completely different or from a completely different way than the average bow hunter. So I was actually talking to a guy the other day who said, well, he's self-taught in the sport of archery, and he's actually had the worst teacher he's ever met. So I thought about it. I'm like, what do you mean, worst teacher? You said you were self-taught. And he's like, yeah, I don't know anything about this. I've learned it all on my own. So it's one of those, we get caught in that. So a lot of the backyard practicing, a lot of bow hunters, a lot of people in general. I mean, I've spent a ton of time in my backyard tinkering with stuff when I first started and learning things the hard way, I guess is the right way to say it. But it wasn't until I got into target archery and was humble and listened and said, hey, how do you set that up? Or how do you do that? Or how did you figure out your draw length and arrows and all this other stuff that I really learned how to really set myself up, or what questions I needed to ask my bow tech at that time to help really make my gear set up correctly for me.
Yeah, they always say the worst question is the unanswered or the unasked question. And with Danny and I at the target range, I mean, we shot Winter League this year, and that's all. Maybe they got tired of us. I don't know, Danny, but we kept asking questions, and that's how we learn. And
it's the only way you learn.
Yeah, you got to ask those questions. But I'm going to ask you a question here before we kind of wrap up this portion here a little bit. For a guy who, I mean, you took us down this road and explained this to us, but for a guy he wants to go out and he wants to go hunt and he wants to get maybe he's looking for some new arrows.
Okay.
What advantages is he going to get over going and buying a box of arrows versus a custom built arrow and having somebody really sit down and ask him those questions? Just in a nutshell. I mean, quickly explain that.
So in a nutshell, imagine going out and you're buying that Russian grade 500 bulk pack round of AR-15 ammo, right? We've all seen those big boxes or the big metal crates. It's like military grade. It's just like cycle through your gun ammo, right?
Right.
That's your box arrow. A custom built arrow is your match grade, Hornady, or even borderline hand load.
Gotcha.
Okay? So what is that going to do for you? Every arrow that's built out of a box is built based on it has a certain kind of fletching based on what the manufacturer chose, which is going to be the most universal for everybody in the world. And then their spine charts are based 100% on what the average specification is. So if your bow is between this poundage and this poundage, if you're running this weight head or this weight head, if you're running our standard component but no additional component, this is the spine arrow you'll shoot, right? And you're limited to that 300, 400, 500, or even 250, 150, 700, 900 grain spine arrow. So you're limited to kind of what's available just out of the box, and you don't get a lot of selection as to what's going to shoot best for what you're going to put on the front, or if you want to run a little bit more tip weight, if you want a faster arrow, if you want a higher FOC arrow, if you want more kinetic energy, things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, when it comes to a custom arrow build, it's just like it's taking that little extra, it's a little extra oomph that you need to in that situation where everything is set to go wrong. How many things are already prepared to go right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think his version of saying hand loading would be the best.
Right, and I'm familiar with that.
Really
I understand that. Yeah, that makes sense, complete sense to me.
So when I used this analogy with a customer the other day who we were having a discussion about custom arrows, and he'd been shooting a standard boxed arrow and he was actually happy with it, and he had actually decided to go the route of custom arrows, and we had built the arrows for him. We were talking about it, and he's like, I just don't know if I'm going to see a difference. And I said, well, here's the thing. I said, these arrows are designed specifically for your bow, your setup, your draw length, everything, the head you're going to use, the type of game you're hunting, everything. When Dan Yassa and I, or Ashley, or even you guys, when you're target shooting, the worst thing that happens if I biff a shot or if I've got a bad arrow or something stupid happens is I miss a piece of paper and I just get angry, right?
Right.
I mean, that's the worst thing that's going to possibly happen. Nobody dies, nobody gets hurt, nothing.
Right.
But in a hunting situation, the worst thing that can happen is you could potentially wound an animal,
right,
and render that animal unrecoverable or just injured.
Right.
So now you need to treat hunting with almost more respect than you do a target arrow. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Makes complete sense.
So I tell people, like, when it comes to custom arrows, when it comes to the correct arrow, and it's not to say that a boxed arrow isn't right for you or it isn't right for someone. We can get a boxed arrow to shoot fantastic out of someone's bow. That's a unique set of circumstances, or it's the right circumstance for that particular bow or archer, or the budget or the price range or whatever they want to be in, or the type of game they're hunting. It could be perfect. But I try to look at it with the perspective of, I'm trying to make the most ethical, cleanest shot I possibly can so that there's 100% success rate every time I put an arrow into an animal.
Mm-hmm.
And if I feel like my setup isn't there, then I don't feel like I'm doing enough on my part, and I'm not comfortable stepping into the woods in that situation.
Makes sense.
Sounds right to me.
Yeah, I mean,
Now,
I never really thought
wanna,
it that way, but that makes sense.
I do want to skip back a ways because somebody did make a comment about crossbow bolts.
Yeah, I was gonna ask
yeah.
you. There was a question on your perspective of crossbow bolts and broadheads and weight specs for something like a Horton Legendary Innovation crossbow.
All right, so I'll be 100% honest. I'm not 100% familiar with that particular model of crossbow, but I do have a philosophy on crossbows and broadheads. And my philosophy is the faster the crossbow does not mean that's how fast you can shoot it. It means that's how much heavier of an arrow or how much heavier of a bolt you can shoot to get into an animal or penetrate into an animal. So what's that mean? Like we sell a couple different model crossbows here from Bear Archery. They're rated at 370 feet per second and 405 feet per second. I find it extremely difficult to tune a broadhead, whether it's fixed blade or mechanical, and not run the risk of any kind of failure on that head out of something that fast. So one of the recommendations that we make is with every bow or with every crossbow you buy, I actually put you into a completely different arrow than comes with the bow that's significantly heavier. So what it does is actually quiets your crossbow down significantly. So the heavier the arrow, the quieter your bow is going to be because there's more energy being delivered into that arrow to make it move. So it's going to quiet your crossbow down. You're going to gain accuracy because the bolt is actually allowed to do what it needs to do, and you're less likely to have failures in the actual the mechanical or fixed blade head itself. It's less likely to plane or steer out of the way, and things of that nature. Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely.
So my recommendation is when it comes to crossbows, shoot the heaviest bolt you can that gets you below 300 feet per second. So somewhere in that 290 to 300 feet per second range. Get yourself the heaviest bolt you possibly can, and do not take a shot longer than 40 yards.
There you go.
Yeah.
That works for me. I think I'm going to take the PSE Coalition over to them and
have them build you some bolts.
Go have a little talk with them.
There you go.
We've got some fun crossbow bolts here that we actually use. So here the one we recommend is the Black Eagle Executioner, which is actually a heavy bolt. It actually utilizes a brass insert on the front, so it's got a lot of weight forward to begin with, and it's actually we've noticed a significant sound difference in some of the crossbows that we sell here that actually create a much better accuracy platform for the end user.
Sweet,
interesting. Well, I'll tell you what, before we wrap up this portion here and throw it a break, I do want to say the numbers have kind of come back and kind of come back closer to the middle on our question, speed and kinetic energy. When we lost you due to the power failure over there, it was 71% kinetic energy, 29% on speed. Now we're 58% kinetic energy, 42% speed. So it's kind of come back to closer to the middle. Is that typically what you see when people come in? Is it almost 50-50 or
it really is almost 50-50, and I would almost say this, and you could dig probably deeper into that. A lot of guys with shorter draw lengths or lower poundage tend to aim towards the speed realm, and a lot of guys with long draw lengths and heavy poundage tend to go towards the kinetic energy realm.
Okay, that's Danny and me. We're the shorter draw lengths, the less poundage.
The theory that I have, and this is my personal theory, is the faster my bow, or the faster the bow I choose to hunt with, all that tells me is the heavier the arrow I can shoot at 270 to 285 feet per second. So if I have last year I hunted with a PSE Expedite, which is a 360 feet per second bow, and I was shooting that bow at roughly 278 feet per second with a round of 500 grain arrow. So I was shooting an arrow that was extremely heavy, hitting a target very hard at a decent speed. It's not a speed demon at 270 feet per second, but it's doing everything I asked that arrow to do in an effective way.
Yeah, that gets me to thinking things a little differently. I mean, when you're talking about speed, yeah. Mm-hmm. So the faster the bow or the crossbow, the heavier of an arrow you can actually shoot.
Right.
Yep.
I like it.
And then you get kind of that best world. I mean, when you go sub 270 feet per second, the bows, I don't want to say the bow's too slow because it's not. Mm-hmm. I mean, we can sit here all day and talk about hundreds of people that have killed deer at between 100 to 190 feet per second. Mm-hmm. People are doing it for years with recurves and longbows. So I can't knock it. But what I can say is that at 270 feet per second and below, the opportunity for a deer to jump or squat the arrow or duck the arrow or move the placement, it becomes a little higher at longer distances, but the sound is actually much quieter the slower the bow is with the heavier arrow.
Gotcha.
There you go. See?
There you go. That makes sense. Makes sense. I tell you what, you guys are doing some different things over there at your shop, and I'd kind of like to talk about that a little bit, but let's take our last break. We come back. I want to talk about some of the things that you got going on that maybe you got coming up here in the near future.
Absolutely.
All right, we're going to step outside. We're going to take our last break. We'll be right back after this.
Acceleration is part of PSE's DNA. PSE pioneered the speed movement. Now they've developed the vapor category to help you find the most powerful bows on the market to fit you.
High speed equates to intense power and building the momentum you need to be successful. Are you a vapor shooter? Find out at psearchery.com.
Last segment of the show, we've covered from the point to the knock.
Yes, we have.
On arrows and everything in between. But Chris, I know over there at the shop, you guys are starting to do a couple of different things over there that really intrigued me here lately. Danny and I started working out roughly almost 9 months ago, and lo and behold, I find out you guys are doing a kind of a group or seminar style Western hunting thing where you guys are doing some workouts with that. You kind of talk about that a little bit.
So in order to talk a little bit about that, I need to talk a little bit about kind of what Beyond the Years is and what our shop's kind of all about.
Sure.
So about I'm going to call it 3.5, 4 years ago, Craig Schneider, the owner of Beyond the Years, actually spent a significant amount of money and energy and time buying good technical hunting gear for him to hunt in out west. So we're talking brands like First Light, Sitka, Cryptic, Kuiu, all these different brands that provide an amazing technical resource for Western hunting, which is really where his passion and where his hunting time is spent a majority of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the downsides to that is living here in the Midwest, we're dominated by brands like, or by, I don't want to say brands, but we're dominated by a very unique set of circumstances. We're tree stand hunters,
right,
and we're ground blind hunters.
Right.
So, and then being here, I mean, the mossy oaks, the real trees, the scent lock suits, the Cabela suits, those are all super popular because realistically, that's what you would need to hunt here in Michigan, in the Midwest, in a tree stand, in a ground blind, and it works good. Everyone's been very happy with it. But sometimes when you take a Midwest gear out west, you learn very quickly that the gear isn't right for you.
Right.
And one of the downsides living here in Michigan is the fact that gear isn't readily available for you to go in, try on, fit, and size. So what Craig found, and Craig's originally from Michigan, but he lived in Texas, where he was really introduced to the hunting scene a lot. And he spent a lot of time, energy, and money on returns and back and forth with that. So with that being said, he thought, there's got to be a better way to do this. So that's how Beyond the Years was started. He actually provided before we moved to this location, he had a small 1,300 square foot shop right up the road, maybe a half mile, and it was packed full of all the technical hunting gear that you could possibly need or want to go out west. So that, I mean, you're talking, we brought in Sitka gear, which is some of the most technical hunting gear you can find to go from Midwest hunting to out west to freezing cold temperatures to scorching hot desert hunting. You can find pretty much anything you need within that gear. Then from there, it went into the footwear with Crispy boots, Kinetic boots. We brought Salomon in this year. We've got Salewa coming in. So dry shod for the Midwest guys. So a lot of technical gear that's just going to make that experience that much more comfortable, that much more effective, and an overall an enjoyable experience. I know for years I put rubber boots on and it completely tore my feet up, right? Mm-hmm. We've all had that issue. But when you put a good quality pair of boots on and you realize, okay, well, maybe the Walmart $12.99 boots that I've been buying for years maybe weren't the right ones.
Right.
And if I spend $150, $200 on a pair of boots, it's really going to change my whole life. I actually had a guy come in a couple months ago at the old store, and try on a pair of boots, and he had an issue with his foot where he couldn't bend his toes, or else it would cause severe pain in his foot. So I put him in a pair of Crispy Thors, which are one of the stiffest boots that still are, I don't want to call it a casual boot, but it's still one of the stiffer boots on the market. And I think he's coming to the shop 4 or 5 times since, and he's wearing them every single time. And he can walk now. He can take his dog for walks. He can go on walks with his wife. He's super happy and ecstatic about it. And I guess it's kind of cool to see that. Now he's planning a hunting trip up north as well with his daughter to go elk hunting. So super excited for him. It's kind of changed his life a little bit. So now that I've kind of talked about the gear, we brought bows in. Archery is really where I come in. That's my passion. That's what I've spent a lot of time, energy, and money learning and investing and trying to figure out on my own. So it kind of meshes Craig's world of the gear and his amazing knowledge in the gear aspect, and he's been able to teach me a ton about that, so I'm able to relay that to customers. And then we bring my archery knowledge in, and we're able to kind of put a great combination together for the total Western hunting package. So now, how does that fall into what we've launched here this year? So we launched something called the Western Hunt DIY Seminar Series. And what that consists of is we're putting representatives or resources in front of a select group of people that have hunts planned or are planning hunts in the future. And we're putting people in front of them that can teach them everything that they need to know about the very specific dangers and experiences and gear that they're going to need to actually be successful either the first time, second time, or period. When you start going in backcountry hunting, it's not like what we're used to here in Michigan. A lot of us drive to our hunting spot, get out of our car early in the morning. We walk in maybe 2-3 miles. We climb up into a tree. We're there for 8 to 10 hours. We climb out of the tree. We go back to our truck. We drive home. That's not necessarily the situation when you're out west. You might drive out, load up a backpack, hike 10 miles in, camp there for the night, hike another 10 miles in, harvest an animal, and then have to walk 20 miles out to get back to camp. And that can be the type of stress that you're going to be putting not only on your body, but on your gear is going to be completely different. Mm-hmm. So we want to make sure that there's an opportunity for people to learn about that. Now, with that being said, it's great to learn and be exposed to the gear, right? I mean, I don't want to say it's a sales pitch, and we've actually been very particular with the representatives that are coming from some of these companies or from the resources out there, that when they come to deliver the message, we don't want it to be, here's why you should buy our gear. We want it to be, here's why you should buy gear like ours in the best gear that you can afford, so that you make sure that you're safe your entire hunt, or that you have the best experience you possibly can. We get a lot of guys that are coming, let's say you're going to Colorado. You can have 12, 13, 14, you can have up to 10 grand invested in the hunt alone. If you don't have the right gear for your $10,000 elk hunt out west, why even go on it?
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So take the time, take the money, invest it in your gear. That way you're ready to have the best experience you possibly can, and you have the highest likelihood of success. So now we've got the gear all covered. That's kind of what the DIY Western Seminar Series was kind of centered around. Now, what did we add that's extra to that to really set us apart from the sales pitch or the aspect of why you should come? What we do is, so Craig's wife, Cynthia, is a certified personal trainer. So what she was able to do was she was able to develop a exercise plan that we meet every other week here at the shop on Saturday mornings at 7:30. Or sorry, not 7:30. It's way too early. It's 8 o'clock. 7:30, you wouldn't get me here on a Saturday morning. Sorry. But no, at 8 o'clock on Saturday mornings, she'll meet with everybody here from the class or anybody that's willing to come or interested in coming. And she runs a workout circuit based completely on the type of, or on the body parts that you actually need to develop to strengthen your core, your legs, your back, your shoulders, your hips, things that you are really going to need to be strong and be in shape for a Western style hunt. And it's designed to, I don't want to say shock you a little bit, but it kind of is. I'll be honest, I haven't hunted out west. I'm not a Western hunter. I know Craig has, and a lot of the guys that have been here at the shop, I've been able to hear a lot of stories and learn a lot from our pro staffers or the guys that we team up with or the different groups that we team up with that have gone on Western hunts. And I've been able to learn a lot more about the actual physical, I don't want to call it trauma, but the physical exertion that you put yourself through in that type of situation. I was actually able to see the physical changes in the guys that last year went out on an elk hunt and were gone for about 10 days. And when they came back, you could physically see that these guys had lost 10 to 15, 20 pounds in some of them, that their bodies had physically changed from the amount of work that they went out and did on a daily basis, and they weren't even successful.
Right.
So there's a lot going on that will be that we really want to make sure that when you go there, that your body is in the physical shape it needs to be 100% successful in a Western hunt. And even Midwest guys, I mean, we do have a very unique hunting style, being that the deer here are ridiculously intelligent and don't know how to look up and see us yet in a tree, or don't understand that we're hiding in that black window over there. But with that being said, we don't have a lot of physical exertion that we need to do to go hunting. So with that being said, you can do a lot physically. And I know you guys have kind of taken your challenge on this year to get back in shape and kind of get more fit for hunting itself. And with doing that, it actually helps the entire experience be better. So we've invited everybody out. All the workouts are open. We actually decided to give the first one away for free. So if you guys want to drop in on a Saturday and do the workouts, we actually do them every other week. So we actually held one this week, which is today's the 30th, so it was on the 29th. And next week we'll be doing a hike. So everybody will actually load up a backpack or the backpack that they'll be using, because we actually utilize this to test the gear that you're going to be using out west. So a lot of guys will throw all their camo gear on. They'll load their backpacks up with 40, 50 pounds of weight, and they'll go on a 2, 3, 4 mile hike, depending on the terrain or the area that Craig and the team has picked out for them that day. So it's a great way to really test your gear and kind of get yourself in shape and figure out what all you need to do and get yourself ready for a hunt before you actually get out there.
Yeah, I just think that's phenomenal. When you first talked about that and I heard it, I was just like, that is so cool.
Right?
You know, I mean, because like you said, us Midwestern hunters, come on, guys, let's face it, we're lazy. I mean, that's just
I don't want to say that, but
I'll say it because I am.
Yeah.
I was that way. I mean, and I'm trying to get out of that mode. It's so easy to go, like you said, you walk a mile in or so or whatever, and you climb up in your box blind, you sit back and you kick back and turn your heater on, and we've become accustomed to creature comforts and taking them into our hunting situations. And I'm just looking for something a little different. But not only that, I mean, some of these guys, like you said, they only get a weekend to be able to do it. And even here at home, because they work so much, and that lifestyle doesn't lend itself to be healthy. So that's why we started encouraging just even the guys around us, the Midwestern hunters who have our creature comforts. We want everybody to be healthy. We want to be able to take our kids, our grandkids, and share those experiences. So that's kind of been our challenge. But I think what you guys are doing is awesome, especially for the guys going out west. I got the opportunity to stop out Thursday. You guys did the elk seminar. That was pretty cool. Having a guy from Idaho, kind of like what we're doing right now, talking back and forth via Skype. And go through that whole series of elk calling for everybody here in Michigan. So
that is pretty.
We
cool.
had an awesome opportunity to have him come in and introduce us to the Elk Academy, which, I mean, he dropped some gems in there for sure. I mean, I think we asked more questions than he anticipated, and we asked some very particular questions that I don't know if we squoze a little bit extra out of him,
yeah.
But I'm pretty sure we did. But we got some great answers, and it was awesome to see what he really had to offer for that seminar itself.
And speaking of great answers, we've got a little bit of feedback coming across our live feedback on Facebook. Kevin Black says BTE is the best archery shop I've found in 36 years of bow hunting.
Oh, we appreciate that.
Jonathan Holland, Chris built my arrows last week, and I love them. Mark Burke says, Chris, I will see you on Tuesday for my arrow build.
Perfect.
I hope you got enough to pay these guys something.
Oh, yeah.
But anyways, I do have a question. Is a shorter draw length, does that allow for better shots at different angles, such as a right to a left, by going with a shorter draw length?
So are you saying by having a slightly shorter draw length, does it help with shots at angles? Or
that's what I'm thinking. If you're going with a shorter draw length, would it be better than to shoot to the right or to the left?
So this is kind of a tough question because I'm looking at it from two different worlds. Personally, I found that if my draw length is too short or on the short side, I'll get actually a lot of left and right misses. And this isn't a perfect situation standing on cement and looking at a target and it's right there. And if I feel like, I feel like a short draw length is going to give me lefts and rights.
Okay.
If I'm in a tree stand shooting down, is a shorter draw length better? No. Optimal draw length is always going to be better in every situation. I see a lot of guys that are run too long of a draw length, and I think most of the time when they think they're going short, they're actually just getting closer to their correct draw length. Because for years, IBO speed ratings have kind of lied to everybody and said 30-70. So everybody thought they were a 30-inch draw length, and everybody thought they could shoot 70 pounds.
Right.
But you end up with guys anchoring with a thumb on the back of their neck. Not that I'm knocking that anchor. There's a lot of guys out there that can shoot with the thumb on the back of their neck and their finger wrapped over, and they can pound.
Yeah.
I mean, more power to them. But you get guys with really long reach behind draw lengths that are their anchors kind of floating, and typically they ask for a kisser button on their string because they can't find a solid anchor every time, so they put that kisser in their mouth and the nose on the string, and they can see through their peep and they're good to go. But I would say if you can find your 100% perfect draw length for yourself, that it will be optimal for you in every situation, regardless of shorter shots, longer shots, left or right.
A properly fit bow works 100% better 100% of the time.
Let me say this. A proper fit bow doesn't look the same on every person.
No.
And it does in the photographs everywhere you see. I get a lot of flack from shooting target that I lean back real far. I'm a skinny guy and not very heavy. So I run a very, very heavy bow. And I don't mean heavy poundage. I'm only pulling 58, 59 pounds on my target bow, but I've got 22 ounces on the front of it and 20 on the back. So my bow sits somewhere around 10 pounds. So to hold that out with one arm, I end up leaning back a little bit with the shot. So it does look like I'm leaning, but my perfect draw length looks one way on me. Now when I set my hunting bow up, I can stand up a little straighter and it looks correct. But just know that if you look at someone or you're helping someone out and say, okay, that draw length looks too long, that draw length looks too short, that it doesn't necessarily mean that it's too long or too short for you. It just means that it's maybe not optimal looking in your eyes, according to textbook.
Right. And Dean Elliott has a question for us. But no matter what arrows we're going to be shooting for hunting purposes, yes, Dean, we will be putting the gut check indicators on those arrows.
I got them setting right over there. And actually, I do want to say something real quick about, I got to thinking about that this morning because the gut check indicators, even if you're not an archer, you can use these when you're rifle hunting if you've got fresh blood on the ground.
Absolutely.
Because I got this in the mail. Mm-hmm. This paper right here is my package for my elk tag that I just drew in Michigan. So I'm going to be fortunate enough to be hunting elk in Michigan this year, and the gut check indicators, even though I'm probably going to be using a rifle, will be going with me, Dean. So
there you go.
Actually, I actually was coming over to your seminar before I even knew that. Which how crazy is that? But I learned a lot over there at that. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, we had a blast. It was Michael Batiste was Michael Batiste from the Elk Calling Academy, which is a online elk calling school where he actually teaches you how to do all different type of bugles, elk calls, using diaphragms, bugle tubes, everything. It's an awesome resource that he's put out there. Just what we learned from him tonight was enough for me to say, okay, if I'm going elk hunting in the next 5 years, I should probably consider signing up for this and putting the work in now.
Right.
He definitely created the value for me, and I think I think, was it $15 a month? I think that you'd be looking into that.
Yeah,
it's an excellent resource.
It's a no-brainer, and also when you get the three names of those calls that he said he was going to email you guys, shoot them over to me if you don't mind, please.
Yep, absolutely. We got that post the other day, so I'll forward that over to you today.
Okay. Hey, we got anything else going on over there?
Dean Elliott says woohoo.
Yeah, woohoo. I said more than woohoo, man. When I found that out, I was running around. I found out I was at work. I went running around the building, screaming and yelling like I won the lottery. Because I did. I mean, there's only 200 tags given out in Michigan, so
it's the Michigan lottery.
So we're gonna be talking about that a lot between now and December. Right. But before we go tonight, Chris, there's one other thing that you've got going. I know you've dabbled in podcasts a little bit, and I want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about something that you're venturing out on.
Yeah, so beyond the years, and we've teamed up with two great individuals, and actually we've kind of developed it into a little bit of a team. But we brought in Kevin Bissell and Aaron Lancott, who will be actually hosting, or two of the main hosts on a new podcast venture that we're going to be sponsoring here at the shop called the Hunt, Hike, Train Podcast. So it's definitely a lifestyle podcast. It's not 100% rooted in bow hunting. But it's more so about kind of follows a lot of what our DIY seminar series goes through. So it talks a lot about we'll be having interviews with a lot of the resources that we have here in the shop, from Sitka Gear, from Crispy, from all the different brands, as well as some of the archery guys, and then a lot of the friends and resources that we have here at the store. We've been fortunate, being that we're a Western outfitter. We get guys from all over the state that'll come down here to really to spend a day to try on the gear, or they'll come in and try on every single pair of boots that we have anywhere close to their size to pick out exactly what they need. And in doing that, you start to develop some relationships and really learn a little bit about people. And what the Hunt, Hike, Train podcast is going to allow us to do is it's going to allow us to actually sit down at a table with headsets on and just have great conversations about where people have gone, what they've experienced, what they've done. One thing people don't think about all the time is a lot of these reps that represent a lot of these great companies like Sitka, PSE, Bear, Elite, Prime, all these awesome brands that we carry here in the store. They've utilized their own products in some way, and typically there's a great story that goes along with them. So we've had the wonderful opportunity to sit down with an awesome guy, and I'm going to kind of leak a little bit of this. So we've got an awesome rep from a company called Nemo, who Nemo is a sleep system company. They do ultra lightweight backpacking tents, or ultra light hiking tents too. Tents, sleeping bags, pads, pillows, all that stuff. They've crossed over amazingly into the hunting world. So we actually had a great opportunity for Kurt, who's the rep. He was a professional rock climber. So we got some great stories out of Kurt, and he was able to sit down with Kevin and Aaron and really discuss a lot of the brand and what people need to learn about it, or why it's important, but then share a lot of the experiences that he has with it. I mean, he actually rolled up. We were had a little bit of vehicle envy when he rolled up in his Mercedes Sprinter 4x4 that was lifted with a full kitted out interior with bed, everything. I don't know if it was a Quigley 4x4 or not, but I mean, it was, he can live in that thing. And he drives around all of the different states that he represents and meets with dealers like us and sits down on podcasts like we had and tells stories and learns about products. And he was our first elk seminar series discussion. So we've utilized that the podcast to really have those conversations. And we actually had the opportunity to sit down at Boyne this year and meet with the representatives from Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, which is an organization that we teamed up with here at the shop to support public land hunting, and the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, which is another company that we are not a company, but another organization that we support very heavily here at the store, because it kind of secures the type of environment, the type of hunting and public land access that we really need to do what our customers really want to do. And to have an amazing talk with them about the current elk population in the state of Michigan and the amazing successes that they've had in this area It was really enlightening. I'm one of those guys that's lived in Michigan my entire life and never seen an elk.
Really?
And I brought that up to him. I'm like, I've lived here my entire life. I've hunted in as high as Clare. That's as north as Clare. And anybody that knows Clare, it's right smack dab in the middle of Michigan. That's as far north as I've ever gone hunting-wise. And I've never seen an elk. I've heard people tell stories, but as far as I'm concerned, they're unicorns. And I would love to see one.
You're going to have to come up with us.
Well, that's what I said. So I actually, Jason Meekoff from Backcountry Hunters and Anglers said he's going to take me up whitetail hunting up by Pigeon River this year, and he guarantees we'll see more elk than deer. But if you'll have me, I will definitely be joining you on your elk hunt. That's for sure.
I'm hoping to go up and start doing just a little looky see over in the area.
Oh yeah,
and probably the next 2 to 3 weeks. Go up for a day or two, and really that area where my tag's at is not terribly far from our deer camp. So you got a Saturday off, you want to truck along. I can't guarantee we're going to see any elk, but I tell you what, the last time I was up in that area, I was doing some trout fishing with my son, and we saw 5 that day. Saw a bull and 2 calves and 2 cows. So.
Oh, see, that'd be awesome. I'd love to take my camera up and catch some of that. And I'm one of those guys that's still putting the money in for the drawing every year and just crossing my fingers and waiting.
That's what I did, man. 20 years. Yeah. It took me 20 years, 20 plus. I can't remember whenever they started that draw is when I started. And I'm telling you, man, I hit the lottery.
It's the Michigan hunting lottery.
It really is. If you're a hunter in the state of Michigan, it's second to winning the lottery. You're right up there, and it's an awesome opportunity. And I like I told you when you came in, there's great resources in the state of Michigan. And if anybody listening did draw a tag and you have questions, we have some great connections of people that we can get you to talk to that can really put you with the right people because of the way Michigan's kind of set up. So,
well, you and I had actually talked a little bit about that, and the person that I'm going with is in the Michigan book. I got the list of outfitters, and actually there's another outfitter we're hoping to talk to and get on the show here in the near future that we just found out about tonight, actually, through one of the companies that support us. So,
that's awesome.
So, well, I'll tell you what, we've been rambling on for quite a while here. So I could talk about the elk hunt all night, and I haven't even done the first thing yet. But I appreciate you taking the time. I'll be over here real soon. I don't know when my arrows will be finished, but as soon as they get done, I'll be over to pick them up. So looking forward to it. So, listen, thanks again for everything you've done for us. Appreciate the talk tonight. For everybody on the live stream, we're going to sign out right now. And for those of you on the podcast, y'all take care, and we'll be back again next week. And don't forget, you can catch us in syndication at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on goodtalkradio.com. This episode was brought to you by PSE Archery,
Scentlock Technologies,
Scent Blocker,
Rambo Bikes,
Hunter's Blend Coffee,
Limwalker Game Calls,
Stanislawski Releases,
Copper John Sights,
Easy Cut Outdoor Products,
Fourth Arrow Camera Arms,
Wind Sense Hunting Sense,
X-Stand Tree Stands,
Spot Shooters,
Gut Check Indicators,
and Packermax Cultipackers.
Thanks for listening, and join us again here next week. Until then, remember, as we always like to say, if you're out on the water or in the woods, shoot straight and be safe. Until next week on the Up North Journal.